Now entering our honorable judge, Matthew Green.
Did he say, oyez, oyez, please rise? Oyez, oyez, please rise for the right honorable judge, Matt Green. Do it again, please.
Oyez, oyez, please rise for the honorable judge, Matthew Green.
Please be seated. We're here today to try the case of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Taylor Edsel. Prosecution, do you have an opening statement?
We do. Can I face them?
Jet them.
Your Honor and members of the jury, my name is Roberto Marzat, and I'm here today with my co-counsel Mateo Vasquez and Benjamin Angel, representing the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Today we are going to tell you the story of Taylor Edsel, a man guilty of arson in the first degree. We will explain the life of Taylor and his constant obsession with fire. Since his childhood, Taylor has been found guilty of arson on multiple occasions, and in this case, we can see his old habits coming back. Today we will prove to you that Taylor Edsel is in fact the perpetrator of the fire at Nash Elective facility on July 4th, 2016. Today we will call 3 witnesses to stand. You will hear from Leslie Duesenberg, an expert in crime scene investigation. Mrs. Duesenberg, who will tell you of her experiences with Taylor and how she has investigated Taylor's fire on 3 separate occasions. You will hear from Effie Edsel, the father of Taylor Edsel. You will hear about Effie's experiences with Taylor's anger and stress issues, past violent behaviors, and history with arson. The other witness you will hear from is Salve, an ex-co-worker of Taylor Edsel. Salve will tell you about his experiences with Taylor threatening him and his personal properties, and why Taylor is the obvious perpetrator of the fire at Nash Elective. On July 4th, 2016, it was clear that Taylor Edsel set fire to Mr. Nash factory to gain control in a time of stress and unpredictability. Mr. Edsel has a past of setting things on fire in times of stress, just like on July 4th, such as tennis balls, his family's dog's house, and even his own house. All situations have a common theme. When Mr. Edsel finds himself in an uncomfortable situation, he makes things right, and in his twisted and wicked way of thinking. Mr. Edsel has a pattern of arson and resorts to fire every time he needs a way out. The evidence will show that Mr. Edsel is guilty of first-degree arson. We hope today Mr. Edsel's pattern of arson will finally be ended, with the jury finding Mr. Edsel guilty of arson.
Thank you, counsel. Counsel for the defense?
Opening statement? Yes, we do. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Ben Gimetti, and I, along with my co-counsels, Gus McGuire and Natalie Packard, are here defending our client, Taylor Edsel, who is being falsely accused of arson in the first degree. From the very day my client was born, society has been beating upon him. Abandoned by his mother, neglected by his father, left to essentially raise himself from the age of 6, the world has not been kind to the defendant. To cope with the reckless actions of his parents, he turned to arson and has gone to prison for his previous wrongs. Today, however, Taylor is a successful young man who has rebuilt his life and relationships and is now an exemplary member of his community. The prosecution will put forward a circumstantial case that holds no forensic proof to tie Taylor Edsel to setting the fire at Nash Elective. The prosecution wants to see Taylor put behind bars, as the prosecution itself and the witnesses they have called each have a beneficial motive to see my client be put behind bars. The prosecution will call Officer Leslie Duesenberg, who has held a personal vendetta against Taylor Edsel since he was 8 years old, and has continuously sought to punish Taylor whenever the opportunity arose. Next, you hear from Taylor's father, Effie Edsel, who wants Taylor out of his life because he cherishes his girlfriend more than he does his own son. And finally, you hear from Salve, a former co-worker who has also held a personal vendetta against Taylor for numerous years. To combat this deeply biased prosecution, the defense will be calling Dr. Alex Packard to testify that during Taylor's stint in prison, he entered, thrived, and was reformed in the Second Star program. Next, you hear from Dr. Nash, owner of Nash Elective and friend of Taylor Edsel, who will testify that he trusts Taylor and knows he would never commit an atrocity like this. And finally, you will hear from Taylor Edsel himself, to testify he did not set the factory ablaze and hurt his friend and boss. The prosecution will put together a completely circumstantial case today. It will ignore the facts to put an innocent man behind bars. The burden of proof will not be met today, and you, the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, must acquit Taylor Edsel of arson in the first degree.
Thank you, counsel. Would the prosecution like to call its first witness?
The prosecution would like to call Leslie Duesenberg to the stand, please.
Please come forward. Yep. Now, all these witnesses have been sworn in advance to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, that's slipping? Is it slipping?
It was slipping, now it's not slipping. Where did it slip down? Okay.
You speak up.
Okay. Your Honor, permission to enter what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5 into evidence?
Well, you may approach the witness.
Yes. I don't think we have an extra copy. Do you guys have?
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Ms. Duesenberg, could you please, do you recognize that document?
I do.
Could you please tell us what that document is?
This document is stating my work experience and my other experience and my education.
From that document, could you please tell us about your education and working experiences?
Yes.
So this is the point, just for instruction, we'd say, now, Your Honor, may permission to enter because it's been verified. But yes,
Okay.
that document's entered in. Please tell about your work experience.
I have a master's in criminology from the University of Phoenix, and I have a bachelor's in criminal justice from Pennsylvania State University. I also have an associate's degree in psychology from the Lake County Community College. I have worked as a special agent at the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives in the Predictive Science Department as a certified arson investigator from 2005 to the present day. And I have been a representative in 3 cases: United States versus Iacocca, State versus Ciorcharo, and Commonwealth versus Kia. I've also worked as a Pennsylvania State Police Trooper from 1999 to 2005, and I've worked at the Wissewee Police Department in trained crowd control from 1996 to 1998.
So, in your extensive work experience, when did you first encounter the defendant, Taylor Edsel?
I first encountered Taylor Edsel when he was 8 years old. I got a call as a state trooper when I was at the barracks in Wissewee. I responded to the call from dispatch when there was a disturbance involving fireballs. When I got there, he was sitting on the side of the street with a bottle of lighter fluid in his hand. He had filled tennis balls after he had cut circles in them.
Hold up a sec. Come on in, make some noise, and then we'll get going. Jury, it's very important that you listen to the testimony. All right, settle in, y'all. Okay, let's go to the question from the top. Can you please, this is the first time you encountered the defendant.
When was the first time you encountered the defendant, Taylor Edsel?
The first time I encountered him was when he was 8 years old, when I was working at the barracks in Wissewee as a trooper. I responded to a dispatch where there was a disturbance involving fireballs. When I got there, he was sitting on the side of the street outside his house where he had cut holes in tennis balls and filled them with cotton balls. He had filled them with lighter fluid and had burned about half a dozen balls already. And he was holding a bottle of lighter fluid in his hand. When I confronted him and I asked him what he was doing, he showed no feeling of guilt or remorse about burning the fires. And he also was gripping his Zippo lighter, which had a very instinctive insignia on it.
Could you please describe your next encounter with the defendant?
Yes. After that, I was called back to his house in fall of 2003, where I was responding to another uncontrollable blaze in the backyard of his house. When I got there, he was standing in front of his dog's house, where it was burnt to the remains. He was standing there in a daze, and when I asked him what he was doing, all he said was, "I'm in control now."
Now, Ms. Duesenberg, could you please describe your background in serial arson profiling, as well as what that is?
Yes, I have been profiling at the Forensic Inquiry Division at ATF for 5 years, and I have a fairly good success rate. Usually 60 to 80% of my profiles of arson cases are true.
So could you please tell us about some of these profiles?
Yes. So there are 3 types of arsonists. The first type of arsonists are typically kids who are just playing with fire and they grow up to usually be fine without much of a criminal record. The second are financially motivated people who may need insurance money, or sometimes they're firefighters who want overtime, so they set fires for cases like that. The third are hardcore arsonists. They are typically emotionally stunted and have some sort of trauma from their childhood. They usually seek control, and the way they seek that control is by burning their environment. And there's typically a trigger event that will set them off to set these fires.
Thank you. So could you please describe the events of July 4th, 2016?
Yes, on July 4th, 2016, I got a call from the Nash flash, and I responded right away. When I showed up, I saw that it was definitely arson due to 2 things. There were damage around the hydrogen duct, which suggested that it was not a natural fire, and there was also accelerant lighter fluid on the scene, which was found from spectrometer results.
Your Honor, I feel that it may be necessary to enter Ms. Duesenberg in the record as an expert in serial arsonry.
Any objections?
No.
The witness has been entered into the record as an expert in criminal investigation and serial arsonry. Serial arson profiling.
Does that change?
It means that that the things that she says have a higher degree of credibility with regard to those specific areas.
So, in your expert opinion, was the Nash flash fire arson?
Yes, I do believe that it was arson due to the damage around the hydrogen ducts and the lighter fluid that was found on the scene.
Did you interact with the defendant Taylor Edsel at the Nash flash fire?
I did.
Please describe that interaction.
I went up to him where his clothes were burned at the scene of the crime, and I asked him why he did this. He only answered me with the statement to make things right.
So, after the fire, did your team run any tests on the scene?
Yes, we ran spectrometer tests, which told us that the accelerant used in the fire was lighter fluid, and there was also a presence of vulcanized rubber on the scene.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has previously been marked as Exhibit 9.
May I approach the witness?
Do you recognize this document, Ms. Duesenberg?
I do.
Could you please describe what it is?
It is the results, the spectrometry results from the crime scene.
Your Honor, permission to enter Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please describe the results of this document?
Yes, so basically this is describing that found on the crime scene was the accelerant fluid, which was lighter fluid, and it also finds that there is vulcanized rubber, which is the rubber which is typically used in tennis balls.
Was this rubber distinct to tennis balls?
Yes.
Are the results of this document consistent with the defendant's method of starting fires?
Yes, Taylor typically, as far as his history goes, will set his fires using tennis balls filled with cotton and lighter fluid, and that is consistent with what he's done.
Thank you. No further questions.
Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
So you mentioned your past interactions with the defendant, and you described the events, the first meeting that you had, and you did not take any actions other than a verbal warning, correct?
The first time I encountered Taylor when he was 8 years old, I let him off with a verbal warning, but I did not feel the need to write a report that time.
These actions were very concerning, though, with the, after seeing how his mom how disheveled and how his mom was and distracted, and how he was told to, I believe, just go outside and not burn the house down, something along those lines. Not a direct quote, but you knew that that was the case and still did not file a report. You did not take any actions to contact social services, let them know. You did not let anybody know that this was a sort of concerning behavior.
No, I did not. As I mentioned earlier, typically there are a few types of arsons, and there is a category in which there are just kids playing around with fire, and I did not find at this time that it was important to write it up or to take it a step further.
Okay. And you mentioned that in your testimony that Taylor's reaction to the fire, you prompted with, why did you do this? Is it not true that they could have said, he could have been triggered by the fire to go into a sort of panicked response state where he was just repeating that phrase, and the first thing you led with was, why did you do this?
Yes, I did ask him that because oftentimes when arsonists are setting a fire, they like to be involved, and I wanted to ask him that directly at the scene of the crime since it was recent.
You didn't ask any other questions beforehand, you just went straight to an accusatory, why did you do this?
Yes.
Right? And your experience is fantastic and shows quite a bit of expertise. However, you do say that your convictions see a 60 to 80% accuracy. That is a fairly wide range, if you ask me. It is great for identifying a suspect, but that's not pinpoint.
Ask a question, please, counsel.
Do you believe that that is truly enough to know for sure, without reasonable doubt, that somebody did something?
There is a possibility that my predictions could be wrong, but like I said, I have a 60 to 80% accuracy rate, and oftentimes that is true.
So there is the possibility of that. And now, you mentioned that vulcanized rubber is fairly distinct to tennis balls. However, I found,
Ask a question.
is it not true that vulcanized rubber can be used in other things, such as tires?
Vulcanized rubber, I believe, at the Nash plant was not used in the tires.
Your Honor, objection to the question. The Exhibit 9 specifically states that the rubber found at the plant was foreign rubber, so not from the tires, and it also specifically stated that it was used in tennis balls.
I examine Exhibit 9. Can you show me that line, please?
Where's that? Hold on. It might be in the testimony.
Okay, the exhibit does not appear to indicate that this vulcanized rubber could only be found in tennis balls.
So it's entirely possible, no, that the vulcanized rubber could have come from something else.
That is possible.
Unless the council finds that line. Any further questions? We should keep moving.
That is all I have.
Thank you. This witness may step down. Prosecution, next witness. If that gets found, I'll enter it into the record. Prosecution, next witness.
All right, our next witness is Roberta Vecchio.
We call Effie Edsel.
Effie Edsel, please, to the stand.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Effie Edsel. I'm Taylor Edsel's dad.
And can you please tell the jury a little bit about your background and the relevance to the case?
Yeah, so I am Taylor's dad. I raised him since he was born with my partner Terry, and my partner left when Taylor was 6.
What was Taylor like as a child?
Taylor was a rather difficult child. After Terry left, Taylor's behavior became increasingly difficult, and he gained an obsession with fire and using a specific Zippo lighter.
And how did your divorce with Terry affect Taylor's behavior?
It got a lot worse, and he was more invested with fire and using it. Terry left behind a Zippo lighter, which Taylor became very attached to and carried around often.
Could you please tell me what occurred in the summer of 1999?
In the summer of 1999, Taylor had gotten in trouble with the police for lighting tennis balls on fire and throwing them in the streets.
Yes, and then the incident with the dog, Muffin. Did Taylor show any signs of regret after burning down the doghouse as well as the dog?
Yeah, so in September 2003, Taylor burned down Muffin's doghouse and killed Muffin. He didn't show any signs of being upset, really. He kind of just was out of touch and detached. But he said he was glad for it. He was smiling, and he was happy that we wouldn't have to pay and deal with the bills for the dog.
So what he said showed that what occurred was purposeful.
Yes.
Okay. What do you remember about May 22nd, 2007? Did Taylor say anything then?
That was when Taylor burned down the building. Yeah, he burned down our apartment complex. He was happy, and he claimed that he'd fixed everything for us and that we wouldn't have any problems if he'd done this.
Fix the problem solutions. And how did the Second Star problem affect Taylor?
So after he started the Second Star program, he was happy and he got a job at Nash Electrical. He seemed happy, but he still kind of threw around the tennis balls and used the Zippo lighter sometimes.
Okay. And at Nash, how did Taylor react to the company financially struggling?
Taylor did not have a good reaction. Nash started failing financially, and he started showing more signs of stress. He was missing his therapy and missing meals, and I was concerned that he would be relapsing. Taylor told me that he knew how to fix everything for Dr. Dre, and he could fix it all. And he started playing more with the Zippo, and that's when I knew something bad was about to happen.
No further questions.
Thank you. And for the jury's sake, we're subbing out Effie. This is still Effie, but Ethan's playing the cross-examination. Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, please.
You may approach the witness, counsel.
Mr. Edsel, in your testimony you say that your wife Terry left you and your son Taylor because of disagreements over parenting. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Because of the separation, you were forced to work 2 jobs to support yourself and Taylor. Is that also correct?
Yes, I believe it was in our best interest.
Would you say that these jobs required you to be away from home most of the day?
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
And in turn, required you to leave Taylor home alone after school?
Sadly, that was one of the consequences of needing conviction.
Wasn't Taylor home alone the day of his first encounter with the police?
Yes, he was.
And it was after this first encounter with the police you said you would scale back your hours and spend more time with Taylor?
Yes, this is true.
And did you?
I tried for a while, but finances got tough and I needed to continue working on the job.
Where were you when Taylor was first arrested?
When he was first arrested, I was at work late at night.
Following this arrest, you made Taylor plead guilty without a hearing because I'm quoting from your testimony, hoping that the judge would send Taylor to a juvenile detention center just so he wouldn't have to deal with him for a little while. Do you remember saying this?
Yes.
You believe that your job as a parent had failed and the state could do a better job in parenting your son?
As all parents, I'm sure.
Yes, objection?
Objection, yeah. It's unfairly prejudicial.
It's not prejudicial.
More prejudicial than probative?
Yes.
It's not prejudicial or probative. I'm only probative because I'm asking the witness about his opinion on his state as a parent.
The statement's about the plea here.
Pardon me?
The statement is about the plea.
I'm asking though because he forced.
Oh, no, don't talk to me.
I'm asking though because he forced his son to plead guilty. I'm wondering how his parenting, if in his mind, had changed and asked the state to do better.
He's painting Effie Edsel as a bad parent.
I'm not painting Effie Edsel as a bad parent at all. These are all Effie Edsel's actions. I'm simply reading them out loud to the court.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. Continue, please, counsel, but please confine your questions to facts of the case.
These are all facts of the case. It's in his testimony.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, I apologize. Back to your two jobs. You're laid off from these jobs, correct?
Yes.
In your opinion, does Taylor bear any responsibility for this?
Sadly, that's most likely the case, as after he burned down the complex, we were given an unfortunately poor reputation.
When Taylor was tried for the house fire and was sentenced to prison, you said that in your testimony, and I quote, you were glad that glad that my child is going to be locked up. Do you remember saying that?
Sadly, I believe that was the best interest at the time.
However, I'm curious about why you didn't state. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong question. Would you say that Taylor's behavior affected your social life in the neighborhood?
Yes, very much so.
You testified that as a result of his work at the Second Star program at Dr. Packard, Taylor's behavior underwent a considerable change. He got a job, started paying rent, was friendly to the neighbors, and you and your girlfriend, Pat. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Is it true that your new girlfriend, Pat, did not take to Taylor? Did Taylor do anything to deserve this kind of dislike?
The reason he was not liked was because of Taylor's history with dogs, as Pat had 2 dogs and was concerned about what Taylor's reaction would be to them.
You mentioned in your testimony that you were afraid that Taylor's behavior would drive away Pat as it did Terry. Is that true?
Yes, as Taylor's past actions have proven that he...
Mr. Edsel, you testified that you saw Taylor at the Nash automotive plant the night of the fire. Did you see Taylor light the fire?
No, I did not. I saw him moving away from the fire.
In conclusion, Mr. Edsel, is it true that if Taylor was somehow conveniently out of the picture, you may not have lost Terry, your jobs, your dog, your home, your friends, and possibly your girlfriend, Pat?
Yes, that is most likely.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. The witness will be permitted to answer the question, though. Would you like to finish your statement?
That is most likely true. However, Terry was always a difficult child, and I wish things could have turned out better.
Thank you. You may step down. Does the prosecution have any other witnesses to call? What a terrific cross-examination.
Gotta be forceful.
Any other witnesses, prosecution?
Yes, we'd like to call Salve to the stand.
Mr. DeSoto?
Please introduce yourself.
Hello, jury. I am Salve, ex-co-worker of Edsel.
What is your employment and education background?
I've earned a PhD in medical engineering at MIT, and I'm on my way to a job as a professor. Currently, I'm employed at a new position, Director of R&D. I was hired by Dr. Nash to refine the manufacturing process with the goal of efficiency and effectivity in meeting the field.
When did you start working with Dr. Nash?
Spring of 2013, I was recruited by Dr. Nash.
And is it true that you were recruited from MIT?
Yes, I was.
What was your relationship with Dre Nash?
Dre Nash convinced me that I urgently needed to turn what was essentially a prototype on a small scale into a full production model.
Did you ever talk with Nash about his philosophy regarding work?
I did. We came close and we discussed more than just work. Dr. Nash believed in reinventing things and reinventing people. And after having a run-in with the law, she firmly believed in rehabilitated convicts. Dr. Nash was supportive of the rehabilitation group called Second Start. I think she was even a board member.
All right. How did the other employees first respond to Taylor when Dre Nash hired him?
Personally, I thought everyone was crazy to immediately trust Taylor Edsel, but my co-workers considered Taylor an amazing colleague and a friend, and overall in a story of redemption. But I saw something suspicious. Even at first, I could not articulate it. I know that Edsel viewed Dr. Nash the way many of us did, as a visionary, but it was more than that. Edsel craved approval, just like an addiction. She needed approval to function, and I chalked it up to loyalty, but we all know this is insanity.
Did Taylor have any incidents with his fellow employees?
There was an employee in my department that was struggling to meet deadlines, and I brought it up to Dr. Nash while Edsel was in earshot, and he immediately volunteered to take care of it. And I heard him tell Dr. Nash that she would motivate the employee or else. All I know is that this employee left the company about a month later without the customary 2-week notice.
Did Taylor Edsel ever show any interest or obsession with fire?
A few odd habits popped up. She was always walking around clicking his favorite lighter. And I remember it distinctively. It was a Navy Zippo. She would click it and then cover it. And sometimes, without anyone thinking around, she would just start flaming and stare at it.
Did you ever see Dre Nash using drugs?
One time I distinctively remember her consuming large amount of prescription pills. Around that time I don't think she was sleeping very well either.
Did you ever personally come into conflict with Taylor Edsel?
Yeah, a time during August 2015, I saw Edsel sitting in her office, burning a wooden pencil. I couldn't let that go. I mean, we're working on hydrogen fuel cell cars, and this entire plant is a restricted area. And she looked embarrassed when I first told her about it. And then we started yelling, and I started yelling back, and it only took a minute or so for other folks to walk in and ask us about it. As Taylor was walking away, I heard her mumble, "Better the pencil than your house."
Was Taylor aware of how dangerous his actions were at the time, playing with fire at an automotive plant?
At the time, I think he was more concerned about his own fire habits, and not about everyone else's safety.
Thank you.
Just real interrupt. Great opportunity to say objection, speculation, right? He doesn't know how Taylor felt or thought, but yes. All set?
Not quite.
Okay.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
I do recognize this. This is a screenshot of some text sent between me and Taylor.
Okay. Your Honor, may I present Exhibit 11 into evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. So, did Taylor ever make any references to fire in your conversations with him?
Yeah, during this conversation, an exact quote would be, "Some people want to watch the world burn," and referring to herself, and it's a threat to my personal property following that.
Did you personally ever feel threatened by Taylor's behavior?
Myself, personally, yes, and I felt the need to tell people, but I never made an effort.
Would you say that you were Taylor's friend, colleague, or do you have any issues with Taylor outside of this conversation?
Though at first,
Did you want the jury to hear what was in those text messages?
I would love the jury to see.
They don't see it. You have to tease it out through the questioning.
All right. So, could you please describe the conflict that started these text messages?
So Taylor had some personal property of mine.
Taylor had personal property.
Taylor owned personal property of mine that I left at the R&D office.
And this was during your transition to your other job, your current job?
So I was trying to get it back, but she held property of it and refused to give it back on demand.
What did Taylor say after you demanded you get your stuff back?
She made a joke of it and refused to give it back and made jokes about fire.
Did Taylor ever threaten any of your personal belongings with fire?
Yes, she threatened to burn it if I ever made any input, threatened to burn it.
So this exhibit isn't actually quite complete.
Oh, okay.
They're missing one last text message.
Yep.
But
We
can
know
I
the line now.
summarize that
Mhm.
text message? Is it true that Mr. Edsel, when holding your stuffed animal, threatened to burn it with a Zippo lighter?
Yes. While holding my stuff hostage, did threaten to harm and burn my stuff without my consideration.
Thank you. That is all.
Witness will please remain seated. Thank you, counsel. Would the defense like to cross?
Your Honor, just, can we address the confusing nature of pronouns in the mock trial?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's okay.
Ben
Every
Coleman
time,
is Taylor.
it always says he and she, because you don't know who's gonna play these roles, they're all non-gendered. It's he. Taylor is he, even when he says she. Would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
So, is it true that Taylor Edsel was given many of the projects that you had previously been in charge of throughout your time in employment of the Nash Elective Company?
Yes, as Taylor gained more reputation in the industry, she gained more of my personal projects that I would think were more fit for me.
Would it be reasonable to say that he was in competition for your position?
I would think so as a new member of the group.
So, according to your testimony, your coworkers found Taylor to be a good colleague and a good friend. Is this correct?
I do think so.
And then in your testimony, you say that nearly all the employees hired from Second Start were good at their jobs and were useful around the plant. Is this correct?
This is correct to an extent.
So,
You cannot measure the amount that they are working, but they are given
Objection,
jobs
that is speculative,
yeah,
that all these employees are
they're
capable
given
of their
easy
jobs.
jobs depending on
There's
what
no
they need
true
to do.
way to determine that.
in Salve sworn affidavit, he says that I think he's. Should I bring that up?
You may approach the witness with his sworn affidavit if you'd wish.
Okay, I'm gonna find that. Actually, never mind.
You may proceed.
So, is it correct that you left your position at Nash Electromotive?
Yes, I do.
And is it correct that you now hold a position at a competing brand?
I do.
Is it true that Stu Baker is racing to bring his electric into production ahead of the Nash Flash?
He is.
And would it be reasonable to assume that a setback to Nash Electromotive bringing the Nash Flash to market would be beneficial to your current employer?
It would.
Nothing further. Your Honor.
Witness may step down. The prosecution have any other witnesses?
No.
Prosecution rests.
Prosecution
Defense, would you like to call your first witness? Sorry?
Your Honor, may we call Leslie Duesenberg to the stand again to sort out the.
We located it in the affidavit.
You may show it to me and I'll read it to the group.
Okay, so I have it here. Robert. Yeah, 111. Right.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Here we go. Here. Based on historical trends, gasoline with rubber of some kind of foreign object.
With rubber of some kind from a foreign object.
Implied to be outside of the factory.
Jury can decide whether they believe that a foreign object is tennis balls and not car tires. The term, the specific line, please, Mateo.
Excuse me. Based on historical trends of gasoline like accelerant in an industrial facility with rubber of some kind of foreign object.
Okay, so
Foreign
it's some
object.
kind of foreign object.
I do believe that I claim that it is used in a variety of things other than tennis balls, one of which is certain types of tires.
Yes, right. So foreign, the jury can interpret what that line means. Defense, call your first witness. No, you have to say the defense calls to the stand. Yes, Your Honor. Stand up. Yes, Your Honor.
Can we call Dre Nash, Dr. Dre Nash to the stand?
The defense calls to the stand Dr. Dre Nash. Please, Dr. Nash.
Could you please identify yourself to the court?
My name is Dr. Gray Nash, owner of Nash Electromotive.
Can you please describe your relationship with the defendant?
I'm his boss at Nash Electromotive.
Can you tell us about how you met Taylor and how you hired him?
He was one of my employees hired from the Second Start program. I also thought that he had turned his life around through the Second Start.
How did Taylor perform as an employee of your company once you hired him?
He far exceeded my expectations and became a very valuable employee of Nash Electromotive. He had a solid work ethic, and as time progressed, I began assigning him bigger projects.
Have you ever had issues with employees that came through the Second Start program?
All of the employees hired through the Packard Second Start program have provided to be useful employees around the Nash Electromotive plant.
Can you tell us a little bit about Salve de Soto and their employment at Nash Electromotive?
Salve was a genius, and we were initially friendly, but he didn't tend to work with others well because of his ego. As time passed, it became clear that he had it out for Taylor and spent more time than reasonable talking about what Taylor was doing.
Can you explain the relationship between your business and Studebaker's company?
We are both trying to bring a fuel cell vehicle to market in the fastest time frame possible.
Do you believe that Studebaker would have motives to interfere with the production at the Nash Electromotive plant?
Yes, I believe that D. Baker's, with his history of scandals, would not hesitate to interfere with another company.
No further questions. Your Honor.
Thank you. Would you like to examine the witness?
Yes, we will.
Prosecution?
Good morning, Mr. Nash. You grew up fairly well off, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And as you said, you sometimes abuse this privilege, not taking no for an answer or getting what you want when you're a kid, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And you said you also abused drugs, specifically cocaine, right?
Yes, in college.
And is it true that you spent 5 years in prison for smuggling cocaine across the border?
Yes, that is correct.
You changed though, and after some schooling in 2012, you designed Nash Flash, right?
Yes.
And when your business went public, you had around 500,000 pre-orders that needed to be completed by the end of 2015. An overwhelming amount, right?
Yes, it was very overwhelming.
But you didn't back down from producing them.
No, I didn't.
You needed to hire the right people, and you found Salve de Soto, who eventually was not a big fan of Taylor, right?
That is correct.
Salve even suggested that Taylor was letting a Zippo in his office on a regular basis, which is, by company law, is not permitted, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And you conducted a secret investigation, and you found tennis balls, right?
Yes.
Were you aware, at the time, of Taylor's past with tennis balls?
Yes.
No, you weren't.
Oh, no.
And you came close with Taylor, and you confided in him, right?
Yes.
May I approach the... Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
This is a series of emails between me and Taylor.
Yes, this is a series of emails between me and Taylor.
So, you were talking about how production was slow, and you joked with him about past offenses, right?
That is correct.
2016 is going up in a blaze, if you know what I mean, not kidding. So, you even let him use his Zippo in the production room, even though that's against the rules.
Yes, it was against the rules, but I still let him.
And at the same time, production was slow, and the fail rate of cars was 40%, right?
Yes.
So Taylor took a more motivator or intimidator role, trying to find a solution, right?
Yes.
And you slipped back into drugs, right? Adderall,
Yes, it was only Adderall.
taking too many at a time.
Yes.
And you agree that you said you were a changed man,
Yes, I said that.
Even
I was
though
a
you-
confused man.
even though you took too many Adderalls, yeah?
Yes, but it wasn't as harsh as cocaine.
And the night of the fire, you weren't there, correct?
Yes.
But Taylor was?
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. You may step down. Defense may now call its second witness.
I would like to call Alex Packard to the stand.
Dr. Packard?
Now, you are a clinical psychologist, yes?
Correct.
I would like to submit,
Would like to approach the witness
Like
with
to
what has
approach-
previously been marked Exhibit 6?
yes. This, do you recognize this as your
Professional resume?
professional resume?
Yes, I do.
And this shows that you have a PhD in clinical psychology. You have a master's in child psychology and a bachelor's in psychology from 3 different renowned schools.
Correct.
So you were the founder of the Second Start program, and I believe that in your past you had
Questions?
there was a period of time in which your license was
Questions?
revoked, yes?
Yes. In 1997, I made a horrible mistake, and this mistake led to my license to be suspended. And in turn, with this mistake, it shaped my ideas, which eventually led me to create the Second Start organization.
Object, that's just not in the affidavit.
It's in my yeah.
It's okay. Continue. I'll allow it.
So your license was suspended, but
Asked and answered. Asked and answered.
yes, okay. Are you passionate about your work, would you say?
Very passionate. I'm known to get rather vocal when questioned about my work.
And meeting Taylor Edsel, you met as his therapist in prison, yes?
Correct. I met Taylor through the Second Start program while he was in prison.
And what did you see in Taylor, and what do you see now?
To begin, Taylor was a very reserved individual. You can certainly tell that he had been rather mistreated as a child. But as I grew to know Taylor and he became more comfortable with me, and through techniques we developed, he became a changed man, and rather I wouldn't question him in society.
And in your professional opinion, you would say that Taylor Edsel is a different man than the one that you first met?
Correct. In my professional opinion, Taylor made a complete change and became a new man, unrecognizable from the man he was before.
Or no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Would the prosecution like to cross-examine the witness?
Yes. Prosecution would. Excuse me, not that one. This one? No. This one right now. Is it true that in 1997 your license was under review due to comments made in an investigation? Excuse me. Is it true that in 1997 your license was under review because it was suspended for statements made regarding state legislation in regards to completing your necessary education for your medical license?
Correct.
Thank you. Do you agree that 77% of former convicts are arrested at least once within 5 years of their release?
That is correct.
Thank you. Excuse me. Did Taylor receive state-of-the-art treatment under Second Start program?
In my professional opinion, he did.
Thank you.
You don't need to thank the witness.
I just love him.
Continue.
You testified that, is it true you testified that arsonists are particularly hard to reform?
That is correct.
Is it also true that serial arsonists are more likely to re-offend if faced with circumstances similar to their first arson?
Yes.
Is it true you received a significant pay increase when you became director of Second Start?
Yes. But that also comes with the added role of running that entire program.
Okay. Did Taylor seem stressed the last time you talked to him before the fire?
He was stressed, but it was a very stressful time in his life as the company he was working for faced an immense challenge.
Okay, thank you. That'll be all.
Witness may step down. The defense may be called its third witness.
Your Honor, I call Taylor Edsel to the stand.
This is in the movies when everybody goes,
The defendant himself.
Mr. Edsel, please take the stand.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I am Taylor Edsel. I'm being accused of arson.
Tell me about your childhood and your relationship with your parents.
So I had a really tough childhood. My dad was not a good parent, and my mom left when I was 6, which I really struggled in my childhood to cope with that, and that led to some of my later mistakes.
Were you lonely during your childhood?
I was very lonely, especially after my mother left.
How would you cope with your loneliness?
Unfortunately, I would cope with fire. It was sort of my method of getting back at my mom for leaving and at my dad for being so negligent that I would light tennis balls on fire and sometimes roll them and basically watch them burn as a way to cope.
You said you made some mistakes. One of those mistakes involved a family dog. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I was 8, so about 18 years ago, I was lighting tennis balls on fire, and one of them rolled too close to the family doghouse.
Just interrupting for a moment. You were 12.
I was 12?
Yep, 8 was the first
8
time.
was the first
12
time.
was the second time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was 12, and I rolled one too close to the family doghouse, and yes, I was under lots of stress there, but that was accidental, and it unfortunately killed the dog.
Who was the investigating officer in this case?
That was Leslie Duesenberg, the same as the previous officer who had.
Okay.
You're getting there, okay. And she.
Objection?
He was convicted of the crime, so whether he says it's accidental or not, he was convicted of the crime for setting muffin starters.
I was convicted.
Well, yeah, that's already been entered into the record.
I'm just asking who the investigating officer was.
Correct. The witness is able to testify as to his intentions.
After this, there was another fire that resulted in your sentencing. Tell us about that.
This one, I accidentally burned down my entire house, which is not something we can laugh at now.
This is no laughing matter.
Was very serious when I did it, and I was under a lot of stress. I was with only one parent, and I tried to light a small fire inside of the house. And as a child, it was a horrible mistake and resulted in the house being burned down.
And who was the investigating officer in this case as well?
This was also Leslie Duesenberg.
All right. What consequences did you face in prison? What was prison like?
Prison was pretty horrible. Yeah, but I ended up working really hard to get a high school diploma and a college degree, and ended up getting out.
It's pretty nice. Now, changing gears, where were you on the night of the fire?
On the night of the fire, I drove over to the plant. I was going to check up on it, and then I witnessed the fire.
Did you have your Zippo lighter in your possession at the time?
I did not.
When you witnessed a fire, did you call the police?
Yes, I did. I called 911. If I'm remembering correctly, I was in a panic, and I called 911 to try and help and save the plant, which I didn't think could be saved at that time.
In your 911 call, it states that you attempted to put out the fire. Is that correct?
I did try to, but as I said before, it was unlikely to be able to be stopped at that point.
Okay. However, I am curious about one thing. Why did you not state your name in the 911 call? Can you explain why you wouldn't?
So I was, as I said before, I was in a panic there. Fire often brings up bad memories of my childhood when I was coping with the trauma that I experienced as a child. So I was in a panic, and I guess I forgot to mention my name to the authorities.
You also state that the Nash plant means a lot to you. That is why you try to put out the fire.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Being with Dre Nash and working a stable job has really helped me. That, along with the Second Start program, has changed my life, and I am a completely changed man.
Now to recap. When you were a child, did you set fire to the doghouse in your home?
Yes, I did, accidentally.
And now, as a changed and respected 25-year-old man, did you set the fire at the Nash automotive plant?
No, I did not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Your witness, prosecution.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Edsel, is it true that you were neglected as a young child?
Yes, I was.
Is it true that when you were 8, you were warned for playing with tennis balls?
Yes, about 18 years ago I was warned.
That was
Oh, sorry.
when he was 8, right?
17, either way.
One of them.
He said about 18.
Is it true that you did not like your dog Muffin very much? And your family was having a hard time with Muffin?
I've never been very fond of dogs, but I didn't dislike the dog.
Is it true that due to your actions, Muffin's doghouse was burned down?
Yes, I lit the tennis ball. I did it when I was 8.
Mr. Edsel, in 2007, your family was behind on rent and needed extra money, correct?
Yes, and that really stressed me out, which did cause me to light that fire.
Mr. Edsel, in 2007, you were arrested for burning down your family's residence?
Yes, I was.
So, forward a couple years, was Dre Nash becoming like a father figure to you?
More of a friend, I would say, and I really respected him.
In the weeks leading up to the Nash flash fire, were you stressed about the immense software problem Dr. Dre Nash was having?
Yes, but as I mentioned before, the Second Start program has allowed me to not respond to stress in the same way.
Is it true that you were at the Nash flash factory at the night of the fire?
Yes.
When Leslie Duesenberg asked you why at the scene of the crime, what did you say?
What's the line?
Do you,
I believe it's I fixed the problem, right?
yeah.
Is that the line?
This was after the fire?
This was after the fire.
So I was in a panic. I guess I said I fixed the problem. I'm not sure why I would have thought that, but I guess in a panic that somehow I thought that fire solved the problem, probably going back to my childhood trauma.
Mr. Edsel, throughout your life, you have been very comfortable using fire, and it is a coping mechanism that you often use in your adult life.
No, I've not used it as a coping method in my adult life.
I'm sorry, did you and Alex Packard not strategize using tennis balls and your lighter as a coping mechanism?
Sorry.
That's not fire.
Yeah.
A lighter is not a fire, Your Honor?
No, I would not actually use the lighter on the tennis balls. I would have tennis balls on myself often as a reminder and a coping method. And my Zippo lighter was a memory of my mother who left me, which I kept.
During the flame counts, yes.
Yes. But I would not light things on fire at all in my adult life.
No further questions?
Mr. Edsel, did you not light a pencil on fire at work?
I guess I may have done that. I apologize.
No further questions?
Now, for the record, he could have said no, because only Salve
Only Salve.
saw that, but he didn't. He said yes.
It was that Salve,
He said yes.
that was never intended to
Yep.
corroborate.
Okay, closing arguments, and then the jury's going to need to vote. And because of where we are right now, you're not going to be able to deliberate. You're just going to have to vote without talking to other people. Guys, we can't have any people in here right now. We'll be done in 5 minutes. Thank you. Go around. Go ahead.
Members of the jury, Your Honor, today it has been made abundantly clear that time and time again, Taylor Edsel resorts to arson when to resolve his problems. Recall the incident involving his family dog and later his own home. Even at such a young age, Taylor showed a proclivity towards fire, especially when faced with stressful situations. When his family separated and his mother was forced to pick up more jobs, he turned to arson, killing his innocent dog. When there's stress, there's smoke. When his mother complained about the rent in the family's living situation, he turned to arson. When there's stress, for Taylor Edsel, there's smoke. He is a convicted arsonist, twice over at this point. As sworn to by Dr. Alex Packard, serial arsonists are incredibly difficult to rehabilitate, and they're very likely to reoffend, especially given if the circumstances revolving around their first crimes are similar. After returning home from prison and undergoing the experimental Second Start program, all seemed well, but in reality, simply couldn't kick his habit. He still tossed tennis balls in the air, cracked jokes about fire with his friends and coworkers, and when he believed no one was around, would light his beloved Zippo in a dark room. Ask yourselves, is this the behavior of a reformed individual? An individual who his own mother lives in constant fear of? An individual who bullies and harasses his coworker and threatens them with fire? I mean, he threatened to light a teddy bear on fire. He's a sociopath. When Taylor Edsel realized that his mentor and pseudo-father figure, Dre Nash and the Nash Flash, Dre Nash's product, were doomed, he sprang into action and solved the problem the only way he ever knew how. Now, he's no software engineer. He can't fix a computer issue, but what he can fix is the whole plant itself by setting it ablaze. Evidence suggests that lighter fluid and vulcanized rubber were used to set the fire, which is consistent with Taylor's past methods. Common sense points that the convicted arsonist who was found near the scene of the fire at the time and had deep emotional ties to the factory on fire points to that man being the subject. Now, the only thing left for us to do is to ensure that Taylor Edsel never starts another fire. He is a clear danger to public safety and has demonstrated no matter how many second starts he may receive, he will always slip back into his old habits. We must make certain that the general public is protected from Taylor Edsel. Members of the jury, it is your duty to seek justice, and we ask you to find Taylor Edsel guilty of arson in the first degree.
Thank you. Defense, closing argument.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you can all see, the prosecution has attempted to place the blame for his past on Taylor himself, rather than the people responsible for the neglect he experienced in his childhood. More egregiously, they have attempted to establish a direct continuity between Taylor's past and his current actions, ignoring his change to the Second Start program and denying him the ability to turn his life around. The prosecution seeks to use Taylor as a convenient scapegoat because of incidents far in his past. Evidence has been brought forth proving that Taylor has changed completely since his childhood and that he cannot be guilty. The prosecution incorrectly tries to assert that Taylor is guilty of a crime for which they have failed to provide forensic evidence. My wishes are that you examine the points brought forth here and come to the verdict that my client, Taylor Edsel, is clearly not guilty of the accusations brought forth by the prosecution.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, congratulations, both teams. This is hard, right? Especially a first time around. I didn't write the script for you the way I did with the middle schoolers, and you guys did a terrific job all around. So, jury, there are 6 of you. Here's how we're going to do it. You're going to put your 2 fists out, okay? You're going to, when I say so, if you find the defendant guilty, you're going to raise your right fist up into the air. If you find that the defendant is not guilty, you're going to leave both arms straight out. Would the defendant please rise?
Get up there.
We, the jury, in the case of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Taylor Edsel, again, right arm up if he is guilty as charged. Find the defendant. Guilty as charged.